Daniel Carter pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship and stared at the massive space station ahead. The Galactic Council Nexus was bigger than anything he had ever seen. It looked like a giant metal city floating in space, with lights twinkling across its surface like stars. Hundreds of strange ships moved around it like busy insects. "First time seeing something like this?" asked the pilot, a blue-skinned alien with 4 arms. His name was Zephon, and he came from a planet called Kepler Prime. "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "It's amazing." Zephon made a sound that might have been laughter. "Wait until you see the inside. The Council has been building this place for 3,000 years. Your people are very young compared to them." Daniel nodded but said nothing. He was here as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. After 50 years of trying, humanity had finally built ships that could travel faster than light. Now, they wanted to join the galaxy's biggest political group. The transport ship docked with a loud clang. Daniel picked up his small bag and followed Zephon through a long metal hallway. The air smelled strange, like flowers mixed with machine oil. Other aliens walked past them. Some looked almost human, but with different colored skin or extra eyes. Others were so strange that Daniel had to force himself not to stare. "The council chamber is this way," Zephon said, pointing with one of his forearms. "But first you need to register at the diplomatic office." The diplomatic office was a huge room filled with desks and computers. Aliens of many different types worked at the desks, typing on keyboards that Daniel could not understand. A tall, thin creature with gray skin and no hair approached them. It moved like it was floating instead of walking. "I am Secretary Nullen," the creature said. Its voice sounded like wind blowing through metal pipes. "You are the human ambassador?" "Yes, sir," Daniel said. "Daniel Carter, representing the United Earth government." Nullen looked at a glowing screen in its hand. "Ah, yes, the application. For membership, how interesting. It has been 97 years since a new species applied to join the council." "What happened to the last species that applied?" Daniel asked. Nullen's face did not change expression. "They were accepted, of course. The council always welcomes peaceful species who wish to contribute to galactic harmony." Something about the way Nullen said this made Daniel feel uncomfortable, but he could not figure out why. Nullen handed Daniel a small metal device. "This is your translator and identification badge. It will help you understand all the different languages spoken here. Your quarters are in Section 7, Level 12. The council session begins tomorrow at the 9th hour." Daniel's room was small but clean. It had a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out into space. He could see Earth's sun in the distance, just a tiny yellow dot among millions of other stars. For the first time since leaving home, he felt truly alone. The next morning, Daniel put on his best suit and made his way to the council chamber. The hallways were full of aliens heading in the same direction. None of them paid much attention to him, though a few stared for a moment before looking away. The council chamber was enormous. It was shaped like a bowl, with rows and rows of seats, going down toward a central speaking area. Each species had their own section with seats designed for their particular body type. Daniel found the human section, which had just one chair. "Welcome, beings of the galaxy," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Daniel looked around and saw a massive creature made of what looked like living crystal. It stood at least 10 feet tall and sparkled with inner light. "Am Council Prime Zerak Thulion," the crystal being said. "Today we welcome a new species to our chamber. The humans of the planet Earth request membership in our ancient council." Daniel felt thousands of eyes turning toward him. Some were normal, eyes like his own. Others glowed or had strange shapes or were located in unexpected places on their owners' bodies. He stood up slowly. "Thank you, Council Prime," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I am honored to speak before this gathering." He began the speech he had practiced 100 times. He talked about humanity's achievements in science, art, and technology. He described Earth's many cultures and languages. He explained how humans had overcome wars and conflicts to build a peaceful world government. As he spoke, Daniel noticed something that bothered him. Many of the council members were not really listening. Some were talking quietly among themselves. Others seemed to be working on small devices, probably computers. A few appeared to be sleeping. When Daniel finished his speech, the chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then Council Prime Thulian spoke. "How charming," the crystal being said. Its voice sounded amused. "The humans show great enthusiasm. However, full membership in this council requires certain qualities that take time to develop. Perhaps a junior associate status would be more appropriate." "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. A new voice answered him. It came from a large, lizard-like creature with green scales and yellow eyes. "It means you would have a voice in minor matters but no vote on important decisions. After 50 standard years, we might consider upgrading your status." 50 years. Daniel felt his heart sink. That was more than half a human lifetime. "The Kalari were junior associates for only 200 years, said another voice. This came from a being that looked like a walking tree with too many arms. They proved themselves quite useful in administrative tasks. "Administrative tasks?" Daniel asked. "Filing reports, maintaining records, cleaning facilities?" Council Prime Thulian explained. "All very important work." Daniel looked around the chamber and began to notice things he had missed before. The species sitting in the front rows all looked old and powerful. Their seats were made of expensive materials and decorated with precious metals. The species in the back rows looked younger and weaker. Their seats were simple and plain. "I need time to consider this offer," Daniel said. "Of course," Council Prime Thulian replied. "Take all the time you need. Secretary Nolan will show you to your quarters." As Daniel walked out of the chamber, he heard quiet laughter behind him. It did not sound friendly. That night, Daniel sat in his small room and stared out at the stars. Something was very wrong with the Galactic Council, but he could not yet figure out what it was. The way they had dismissed humanity's achievements, the way they talked about other species doing administrative tasks, the way the older species seemed to look down on everyone else. Daniel had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat. His training told him to watch, listen, and gather information before making any decisions. Whatever was happening here, he needed to understand it before he could decide what to do about it. He opened his laptop and began writing his first report, to Earth, but instead of sending it right away, he saved it as a draft. Something told him that his communications might not be as private as he hoped. 3 weeks had passed since Daniel's first meeting with the Galactic Council. Every day he attended sessions where the Council discussed trade agreements, territory disputes, and new laws. Every day he watched the same pattern repeat itself. The older species like the crystal Zerakians and the lizard-like Vorthak made all the important decisions. The younger species sat quietly in the back rows and only spoke when asked direct questions. Most of the time, they just nodded and agreed with whatever the older species wanted. Daniel tried to talk to some of these younger species during mealtimes, but they always made excuses and walked away quickly. It was as if they were afraid to be seen talking to him. One evening, Daniel was walking back to his quarters when he heard a strange clicking sound coming from a maintenance shaft. He stopped and listened. The clicking had a pattern to it, almost like a code. Curious, he knelt down and tapped on the metal grate covering the shaft. The clicking stopped. Then, very quietly, a voice spoke in broken English. "Human, you should not be here." "Who are you?" Daniel whispered. A section of the grate slid aside, and a creature unlike any Daniel had seen before poked its head out. It looked like a giant insect with 6 arms and large compound eyes that reflected the hallway lights. "I am Kex 9, worker of the Thrani people," the creature said. "I fix things that break on this station." "Why are you hiding in there?" Daniel asked. Kex 9 looked around nervously before answering. "Workers like me are not supposed to talk to council members or diplomats. It is against the rules." "What rules?" Kex 9 climbed out of the shaft and stood up. He was about Daniel's height but much thinner. "The rules say that service species must stay in their assigned areas. We eat in different places, sleep in different places, work in different places." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "Service species? Yes?" The Thrani joined the Council 800 years ago. We were promised equal membership, but instead we became maintenance workers, cleaners, and data processors. All Thrani who live in Council space do these jobs. What about your home planet? Kex-9's compound eyes seemed to dim. The Council controls all trade with our world. They decide what we can buy and sell. They take our best young people to work in Council facilities. They say it is for education, but those people never come home. Daniel's military training kicked in. This sounded like economic slavery disguised as cooperation. Kex-9, can you show me more about how this station really works? The insect-like alien looked terrified. That would be very dangerous. If they catch us, they will send me back to the service levels and you. I do not know what they would do to you. I need to understand what's really happening here, Daniel said. My people are about to make the same mistake your people made. Kex-9 was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded. Follow me. But we must be very careful. For the next hour, Kex-9 led Daniel through a maze of maintenance tunnels and service corridors that most people never saw. They passed through areas where hundreds of aliens from different species worked at simple, repetitive tasks. Some were sorting packages, others were cleaning equipment or repairing machinery. All of these species joined the Council hoping for partnership, Kex-9 explained as they walked. All of them became workers instead. They reached a computer terminal hidden in a storage room. Kex-9's 6 arms moved quickly across the keyboard, typing commands that Daniel could not understand. I should not be accessing these files, Kex-9 said nervously. But you need to see the truth. The computer screen filled with documents written in many different languages. Daniel's translator device began working overtime, converting the alien text into English. What Daniel read made his blood run cold. The first document was labeled Pacification Protocol for the Thrani Species. It outlined a step-by-step plan for taking control of the Thrani civilization. First, the Council had offered them advanced technology in exchange for trade agreements. Then they had gradually taken control of the Thrani economy by making them dependent on Council-controlled supply chains. Finally, they had recruited the smartest Thrani away from their home planet, leaving behind a population that could not resist Council control. This is horrible, Daniel whispered. It gets worse, Kex-9 said, bringing up more files. The next document was about the Kalari, the tree-like species that had been mentioned in Daniel's first Council session. The Kalari had once been master engineers who built incredible cities on their swamp planet. Now they worked as janitors and file clerks throughout Council space. Their homeworld had been strip-mined for rare metals needed by the older Council species. Document after document revealed the same pattern. Every species that had joined the Council in the past 1,000 years had been systematically destroyed as an independent civilization. Their resources were taken, their people were put to work for the benefit of the older species, and their cultures were slowly erased. How many species has this happened to? Daniel asked. Kex-9 typed another command. A list appeared on the screen, with dozens of names. 43 species have been pacified over the past millennium, Kex-9 said. 12 other species refused to cooperate with the pacification process. What happened to those 12 species? Kex-9 hesitated before opening another file. This one was labeled Harmony Directive Implementation Reports. Daniel read the first report and felt sick to his stomach. The Harmony Directive was the Council's plan for completely destroying any species that would not submit to their control. Entire planets had been sterilized using weapons that killed all life while leaving. The world's ready for new colonization. They commit genocide, Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Kex-9 replied. And now they are preparing the same protocols for your species. Kex-9 opened one final file. This one was labeled Human Assessment and Integration Planning. The document outlined everything the Council had learned about Earth during Daniel's 3 weeks on the station. It included detailed plans for infiltrating human governments, taking control of Earth's computer networks, and positioning Council fleets just outside human space. The most terrifying part was the timeline. The Council planned to begin the pacification of humanity within 6 months. They were just waiting for Daniel to return to Earth with news of humanity's junior associate status. Once human leaders lowered their guard, the council would strike. "I have to warn my people," Daniel said. "You cannot," Kex-9 replied sadly. "All communications from the station are monitored. If you try to send a warning message, they will know immediately. They have patrol ships watching all the space routes back to your system. No ship leaves here without council permission." Daniel stared at the evidence on the computer screen. Humanity was walking into a trap, and he was the only person who could stop it. But he was trapped on a space station surrounded by enemies with no way to contact Earth and no way to escape. "There might be one way," Kex-9 said quietly, "but it would be very dangerous. Tell me." "The Council has laws that are very old, from when they were actually a fair organization. One of these laws says that any species can demand a formal hearing if they have evidence of crimes against galactic law. Would they actually hold such a hearing? They would have to. The older species are very proud of following their ancient laws, even when those laws work against them. But," Kex-9 paused. "But, what? If you demand such a hearing, you would have to present your evidence in front of all 47 council species. If they decide you are lying, or if they vote against you, the punishment is death." Daniel looked at the files on the screen one more time. Images of destroyed planets and enslaved civilizations filled his mind. Then he thought of Earth, of his wife Lisa waiting for him to come home, of the 6 billion humans who had no idea what was coming for them. "How do I request this hearing?" he asked. Kex-9 stared at him with his large compound eyes. "Are you sure? There has never been a case where the accused species won such a hearing." "There's never been a case where the accused species was humanity," Daniel replied. For the first time since they had met, Kex-9 made a sound that might have been laughter. "You humans really are as crazy as the rumors say," the alien worker said. "Very well, I will help you prepare, but we will need allies, and we will need a plan that no one expects." As they began planning humanity's desperate gambit, Daniel realized that everything he had learned as a soldier was about to be put to the ultimate test. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin, and it would be fought not with weapons, but with words, evidence, and the hope that somewhere in the galaxy justice still mattered. Daniel spent the next 2 weeks preparing for the most important speech of his life. Working with Kex-9 and a small group of other oppressed aliens, he gathered evidence and planned his presentation. The group included Yara, a Kalari who remembered when her people were free engineers, and Bryn, a young Nexari whose planet had been stripped of its forests by council mining operations. Each night they met in secret, copying files and organizing proof of the council's crimes. Daniel learned that the network of oppressed species was larger than he had imagined. Workers, servants, and junior diplomats from dozens of worlds were quietly angry about their treatment, but none had ever dared to speak out. "The older species will be very angry when you present this evidence," Yara warned Daniel during one of their meetings. Her tree-like form shook with worry. "They have kept these secrets for 1,000 years. Let them be angry," Daniel replied. "Anger makes people make mistakes." On the morning of the hearing, Daniel put on his best suit and walked to the diplomatic office. Secretary Nolan looked surprised to see him. "Ambassador Carter," the gray-skinned alien said in its wind-like voice. "I was not expecting you today. I wish to request a formal hearing under the ancient rights of accusation," Daniel said clearly. Nolan's face, which never showed emotion, somehow managed to look shocked. "The ancient rights have not been invoked in over 600 years. Are you certain you understand what you are requesting?" "I understand completely," Daniel said. "I formally accuse the Galactic Council leadership of crimes against galactic law, including genocide, slavery, and systematic oppression of member species. I demand the right to present evidence before the full council." Nolan was quiet for a long time. Then it touched its computer screen with one long finger. "Council Prime Thulian wishes to speak with you immediately," Nolan said. Daniel was escorted to a private chamber where the massive crystal being waited. Up close, Council Prime Thulian was even more impressive. The creature's body was made of what looked like living diamond, and colored lights moved through its form like captured lightning. "Ambassador Carter," Thulian said, its voice deep and powerful. "This is most unexpected. The ancient rights of accusation carry serious penalties for those who make false claims." "I am aware of the risks," Daniel replied. "The penalty for false accusation is death," Thulian continued. "And in 3,000 years of Council history, no accused species has ever been found innocent of the charges brought against them." Daniel met the crystal being's glowing eyes without flinching. "Then I guess I'll be the first." Thulian made a sound that might have been laughter. "How amusing. Very well, human. Your hearing will be held tomorrow at the 10th hour. I do hope you have prepared something entertaining for us." That night, Daniel barely slept. He reviewed his evidence one final time and practiced his speech. Kex 9 visited him in his quarters to make sure everything was ready. "I have arranged for the files to be transmitted to the main display screen during your presentation," the insect-like alien said. "But remember, once you begin speaking, you cannot stop until you are finished. The ancient rights protect you during your presentation, but if you pause for too long or try to leave the chamber, that protection ends." "I understand," Daniel said. "What about you and the others? Will you be safe?" Kex 9's compound eyes dimmed, slightly. "We have prepared for the possibility that we might not survive this, but perhaps our children will live in a better galaxy because of what we do today." The next morning, the council chamber was more crowded than Daniel had ever seen it. Word of the hearing had spread throughout the station, and representatives from all 47 species were present. Even species that rarely attended council sessions had sent delegates. Daniel walked to the center of the chamber, where a single chair waited for him. The chamber was completely silent as he sat down and looked up at the thousands of alien faces surrounding him. Council Prime Thulian stood at his elevated platform and spoke in a voice that filled the entire chamber. "We are gathered today to hear accusations brought by Ambassador Daniel Carter of the human species. Under the ancient rights of accusation, he will present evidence of alleged crimes committed by this council. Remember, beings of the galaxy, that false accusations under these rights are punishable by death." Thulian turned to Daniel with what might have been a smile. "You may begin, Ambassador." Daniel stood up slowly. For a moment, he thought about his wife Lisa back on Earth, about the children playing in parks who had no idea their future was being decided in this chamber light years away. Then he began to speak. "Honorable beings of the Galactic Council," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers. "I stand before you today not as a supplicant seeking membership, but as a prosecutor, bringing evidence of the greatest crimes in galactic history." A murmur ran through the chamber. Daniel pressed on. "For over 1,000 years, this council has systematically enslaved, exploited, and murdered entire civilizations. You have used the promise of membership and cooperation to lure younger species into traps from which they can never escape." The murmur became an angry buzzing. Several council members stood up, but Thulian gestured for silence. "These are serious accusations, Ambassador," Thulian said. "I hope you have evidence to support them." "I do," Daniel replied. He gestured to Kex 9, who was hidden in the technical booth above the chamber. Instantly, the main display screens throughout the chamber lit up with documents, images, and data files. "This is the pacification protocol used against the Thrani species 800 years ago," Daniel said as the first document appeared on screen. "It shows step-by-step instructions for destroying their independence and turning them into a slave labor force." The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The Thrani delegation seated in the back rows began clicking and chittering in their native language. Daniel continued without pause. "This document shows similar protocols used against the Kalari, the Nexari, the Volan, and 40 other species. Every one of these civilizations was promised equal partnership. Everyone was instead enslaved." More documents flashed on the screens. Images of destroyed cities, strip-mined planets, and enslaved populations filled the chamber. Many of the younger species representatives were crying or making sounds of distress in their native languages. But slavery was not enough for this council. Daniel said, his voice growing stronger. When 12 species refused to cooperate, with your pacification protocols, you implemented the Harmony Directive. The screens now showed images that made even Daniel sick to look at. Dead planets, lifeless worlds that had once been home to billions of beings. 12 entire civilizations were murdered, Daniel said. Not conquered, not defeated in war, but completely exterminated because they refused to become your slaves. Billions of innocent beings died because they wanted to remain free. The chamber was in chaos now. Representatives were shouting at each other in dozens of languages. Some of the older species looked furious, while many of the younger species looked terrified and angry. Council Prime Thulian raised one massive crystal arm, and slowly the chamber grew quiet. These are very serious accusations, Thulian said, its voice cold as ice. But accusations are not proof. How do we know these documents are real? Daniel smiled for the first time since the hearing began. Because they came from your own computer systems. Every file, every image, every piece of evidence was copied directly from council databases. You kept detailed records of your crimes. Impossible, said the large lizard-like Vorthak representative. Our security systems cannot be breached. They can if you have help from the inside, Daniel replied. Help from the very people you have been oppressing for centuries. As if on cue, beings throughout the chamber began to stand up. Kex 9 emerged from the technical booth and walked down to join Daniel. Yara stood up in the Kalari section. Bryn rose from among the Nexari delegates. Dozens of other beings, members of oppressed species throughout the council, stood up to show their support. The beings you turned into servants and slaves have been watching, waiting, and gathering evidence, Daniel said. They know the truth about what you've done, and they're not afraid to speak anymore. The chamber fell silent again. Daniel could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him as he prepared to deliver his final words. And now, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, you are preparing to do the same thing to my species. You plan to pacify humanity within 6 months. You have already positioned your fleets outside our space and prepared your infiltration protocols. He paused and looked directly at Council Prime Thulian. But I have news for you. Humanity rejects your offer of membership. We reject your authority. We reject your right to enslave and murder innocent beings. And we reject your threats against our people. Daniel took a deep breath and spoke the words that would change galactic history forever. By the authority given to me by the United Earth Government, I hereby declare that a state of war exists between humanity and the Galactic Council. We will not submit to your slavery, and we will not allow you to continue your crimes against other species. This declaration takes effect immediately. The chamber exploded in chaos. Some beings screamed, others roared, and many simply sat in stunned silence. In 3,000 years of council, the council chamber fell completely silent. Every being in the room stared at Daniel, waiting for his answer. Council Prime Thulian's crystal body pulsed with angry red light. What are you talking about, human? Thulian demanded. Our intelligence. Reports show that Earth has exactly 12 faster-than-light ships. We have been watching your system for months. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a simple communication unit, but Kex 9 had modified it for a very special purpose. You've been watching the ships we wanted you to see, Daniel said calmly. He pressed a button on the device. Suddenly, every screen in the council chamber changed. Instead of showing the evidence documents, they now displayed images from space around the Galactic Council Nexus. But these were not normal images. They showed ships, hundreds of them, appearing as if from nowhere around the massive space station. The ships were dark and angular, built for war rather than beauty. They had been hiding using technology that made them invisible to council sensors. Now they revealed themselves, their weapons already pointed at the station's critical systems. Impossible, whispered the Vorthak representative. Where did they come from? They've been here for 3 weeks, Daniel replied. Just like I have. While I was learning about your crimes, my people were positioning our fleet for this moment. Council Prime Thulian's voice shook with rage. 12 ships cannot threaten this station. We have defense systems that could destroy 1,000 primitive vessels. Daniel smiled. Look at your screens more carefully. Count the ships. There was a moment of frantic activity as council members and their assistants began counting the human vessels surrounding the station. The number kept growing as more ships decloaked from their hiding positions. 200 ships, reported a nervous-looking alien from the intelligence section. Keep counting, Daniel said. 400, 600, 800. The counting continued as more and more human ships revealed themselves. They emerged from behind asteroids, from the shadows of the station itself, and from positions throughout the local space around the Nexus. Final count, the intelligence officer announced in a shaking voice. 1,200 human combat vessels. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Council members were shouting orders in their native languages, trying to contact their home fleets and demanding explanations from their military advisors. But how? Thulian demanded. Your species has only had faster-than-light travel for 50 years. How could you build such a fleet? Daniel's expression grew serious. Because unlike you, we learn from history. When humans first started exploring space, we found evidence of other civilizations. Dead worlds, destroyed cities, entire species that had simply vanished. We realized the universe might not be a friendly place. He gestured to the images on the screens, which now showed detailed views of the human ships. They were clearly built for combat, with heavy armor and advanced weapon systems. While we sent diplomats like me to make contact with you, our governments were also preparing for the possibility that you might be hostile. We've been building this fleet in secret for 15 years. 15 years? Gasped a representative from the bird-like avian species. Every asteroid mining operation in our system has been building ships and weapons, Daniel continued. Every space factory has been working around the clock. Every human colony has contributed resources to this project. We call it Project Guardian. The truth of humanity's preparations began to sink in throughout the chamber. While the Council had been watching a handful of human ships conducting peaceful exploration and diplomacy, Earth had been secretly building the largest war fleet in galactic history. You've been planning this war from the beginning, Thulian accused. No, Daniel replied firmly. We hoped we would never need these ships. We hoped the galaxy would welcome us peacefully. But we prepared for the possibility that it wouldn't. And when I discovered your crimes, I knew our preparations had been necessary. A new voice spoke from the chamber's communication system. It was Admiral Kate Morrison, commander of the human fleet. This is Admiral Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force. All Council vessels in this system are ordered to stand down immediately. Any ship that attempts to leave this area or communicate with outside forces will be destroyed. Council Prime Thulian's crystal form blazed with fury. You cannot hold us prisoner here. We have patrol fleets throughout the galaxy. When they realize what has happened, they will come to rescue us. Daniel pressed another button on his device. The screens changed again, now showing images from star systems throughout Council space. In system after system, human ships were emerging from hiding and taking control of critical facilities. Our intelligence networks have been mapping your military positions for months, Daniel explained. Right now, human forces are taking control of your major shipyards, communication centers, and supply depots. Your patrol fleets are being surrounded and given the same choice we're giving you now: surrender or be destroyed. The chamber fell silent as the scope of humanity's operation became clear. This was not just one fleet attacking one station. This was a coordinated assault on the entire Council power structure. But your species is young, protested a representative from the slug-like Mallory. How could you develop such advanced military technology so quickly? Because we had good teachers, Daniel replied. Every species you've enslaved has members working in your research facilities. They've been copying your technology and sending the information to resistance networks. Those networks have been sharing it with us. Kex-9 stepped forward, his insect-like form clicking with what Daniel had learned was laughter. The Thrani have been copying your weapons technology for 200 years, Kex-9 announced. The Kalari have been sharing engineering secrets. The Nexari have been providing tactical information. Every species you oppressed has been preparing for this day. That's impossible, Thulian snarled. Our security systems would have detected such activities. Your security systems were designed by enslaved species, Yara said, her tree-like form rustling with amusement. We know every weakness because we built the weaknesses ourselves. Daniel looked around the chamber at the shocked faces of the council members. Some looked angry, others looked terrified, and a few looked almost impressed. This is how humans fight wars, Daniel said quietly. We don't just attack with brute force. We gather intelligence, we build alliances, we prepare carefully, and we strike when the time is right. We've been at war with you since the moment I learned about your crimes. You just didn't know it yet. Admiral Morrison's voice came through, the speakers again. Council vessels in Systems 7 through 23 have surrendered. Council vessels in Systems 31 through 36 are requesting terms for surrender. Resistance has been minimal. Daniel turned to face Council. Prime Thulian directly. Your 1,000-year reign of terror is over, he said. The question now is whether you want to surrender peacefully or force us to take more aggressive action. You cannot defeat us, Thulian replied, but its voice lacked the confidence it had shown before. Even if you control our outer territories, our core worlds have defenses you cannot imagine. Actually, we can imagine them quite well, Daniel said. He pressed his device one more time. The screens now showed images from the Council's most heavily defended core systems. Human ships were already there, waiting in positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected. How? Thulian whispered. The same way I got information from your secure databases, Daniel replied. With help from the people you thought were your loyal servants. Every Council facility has workers from oppressed species. They've been helping us map your defenses and plan our attacks for months. The massive crystal being seemed to shrink as the full scope of humanity's victory became clear. The Council's greatest weakness had been their own arrogance. They had trusted their enslaved populations to remain passive, and that trust had been their downfall. What do you want? Thulian asked finally. Daniel looked around the chamber one more time, seeing the faces of beings from dozens of species who had lived under Council oppression for centuries. We want you to surrender unconditionally, he said. We want you to release every enslaved species and return control of their worlds to them. We want you to stand trial for your crimes against galactic civilization. And if we refuse? Daniel's expression grew cold. Then we will do to you what you did to the 12 species that refused to submit to your rule. The difference is we have the power to do it, and you don't have the power to stop us. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, Council, Prime Thulian's crystal form dimmed to a pale blue light. The Galactic Council surrenders, it said quietly. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the oppressed species of the galaxy were free. And humanity had shown that sometimes the best way to ensure peace was to be prepared for war. 6 months after the Galactic Council's surrender, Daniel Carter stood in the same council chamber where he had declared war. But everything had changed. The room buzzed with excited conversations in dozens of languages as representatives from free species worked together to build a new galactic government, where once the older species had sat in fancy seats at the front. Now all species sat together in simple chairs arranged in a circle. The Thrani worker Kex 9 was now the elected representative of his people. Yara the Kalari sat next to him, no longer forced to hide her intelligence behind menial labor. The vote is complete, announced Admiral Morrison, who had been chosen as the temporary president of the new Galactic Union. The motion to establish the Universal Rights Charter passes with support from all 47 member species. The chamber erupted in cheers and celebration sounds from many different types of beings. Daniel smiled as he watched former slaves and their former masters working together to create laws that would protect everyone's freedom. But the path to this moment had not been easy. The months after the Council's surrender had been filled with difficult decisions and painful revelations. The trials of the former Council leaders had lasted 3 months. Evidence of their crimes filled thousands of data files. Entire planets had been stripped of resources. Billions of beings had died in the genocide programs. trillions more had lived their entire lives as slaves. Council Prime Thulian and the other older species leaders were found guilty of crimes against galactic civilization. Their punishment was exile to a remote system where they would spend the rest of their lives in simple communities, forbidden from ever holding power again. It is not enough, many beings had argued during the trials. They should be executed for what they did. But Daniel and the other human leaders had argued for mercy. If we kill them, we become like them, Daniel had said during one heated debate. We will show the galaxy that there is a better way to handle justice. Not everyone agreed, but eventually the decision for exile was accepted. The former council leaders were now living on a small agricultural world, growing their own food and learning what it meant to work with their own hands. The hardest part had been dealing with the enslaved populations. Millions of beings had spent their entire lives as workers, servants, and laborers. Many had never seen their home planets. Some species had been enslaved for so many generations that they had forgotten their own cultures and languages. The Thrani people were among the luckiest. Their homeworld was still populated by free Thrani who remembered the old ways. Kex 9 and the other enslaved Thrani were able to return home and reconnect with their heritage. But other species faced more difficult situations. The Malari people had been extinct on their homeworld for over 300 years. Only the enslaved populations remained. Now they had to rebuild their entire civilization from scratch. Humans had provided ships, resources, and expertise to help with these reconstruction efforts. Earth's engineers worked alongside freed aliens to rebuild damaged worlds and construct new homes for displaced populations. "Why do you help us so much?" Yara had asked Daniel during one of their planning meetings. "Your people won the war. You could take whatever you wanted." Daniel had thought for a moment before answering. "Because that's not why we fought. We didn't fight for power or resources. We fought because what the council was doing was wrong. Now we have to help build something better." The new Galactic Union was based on principles that humans had learned from their own difficult history. Every species, no matter how young or old, had equal representation. Decisions were made by vote, with no species allowed to dominate others. Most importantly, any species could leave the Union at any time if they chose to. "Freedom means the right to say no," Admiral Morrison had explained during the early planning sessions. "If membership is forced, then it's not really freedom." The Union also established the Galactic Defense Force, a combined military organization designed to protect member species from outside threats and prevent any group from gaining too much power. Ships and personnel from many species served together, with humans providing much of the advanced technology that had won the war. Daniel had been offered the position of Union President, but he had declined. Instead, he chose to serve as Earth's ambassador, continuing the diplomatic work he had started. "The galaxy doesn't need human rulers," he had told the selection committee. "It needs human ideals, freedom, cooperation, and the belief that every intelligent being deserves respect." Today's session was focused on a new challenge. Long-range scouts had detected signals from beyond the galaxy's edge. It appeared that other galaxies might contain intelligent life, and some of those signals suggested possible threats. "We must be prepared," said Captain Chen Williams, the human officer now commanding the Galactic Defense Force. "Our victory over the old council was just the beginning. The universe is vast and we don't know what else might be out there." Daniel nodded as he listened to the discussions about new exploration missions and defense preparations. Humans had taught the galaxy how to fight for freedom. Now they had to teach it how to defend that freedom against whatever might come next. After the session ended, Daniel walked to the observation deck that looked out into space. The same stars that had seemed so lonely during his first arrival now seemed full of possibilities. Ships from dozens of species moved peacefully through space, carrying trade goods, passengers, and messages between free worlds. Kex 9 joined him at the observation window. The Thrani had become one of Daniel's closest friends during the reconstruction. "Period. Do you ever regret what you did?" Kex 9 asked, his compound eyes reflecting the starlight. "Which part?" Daniel replied. "Starting a war. So many people died in the fighting even though we won quickly. Daniel was quiet for a moment. The war had indeed been swift, but not without cost. Several thousand beings had died on both sides during the brief conflicts. Each death weighed on Daniel's conscience. "I regret that violence was necessary," Daniel said finally. "But I don't regret stopping the Council's crimes. If we had done nothing, billions more would have suffered and died under their rule." "The humans have a saying about this, don't they?" Kex9 asked. "Yes. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We couldn't do nothing once we knew the truth." A new ship appeared in the space around the station. It was a Kalari vessel returning from a successful mission to restore their people's ancient forest cities. Daniel smiled as he watched it dock peacefully with the station. "What do you think the future holds, Kex9 asked. Daniel looked out at the stars, thinking about the mysterious signals from other galaxies and the challenges that lay ahead. "I think the galaxy is going to need to learn how to work together even more than it already has," he said. "Humans have shown that a young, supposedly weak species can change everything if they're determined enough. But we can't face the future alone. We'll need every species, every perspective, every unique strength that exists in this galaxy." He turned to face his friend. "The Council ruled through fear and oppression for 1,000 years. We're going to build something that will last even longer, something based on cooperation and respect. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is." As if to prove his point, the chamber behind them filled with the sounds of 47 species working together, planning missions to help rebuild damaged worlds and preparing to face whatever challenges the universe might bring. Daniel Carter had come to the Galactic Council as a simple diplomat, hoping to gain membership for his people. He was leaving as the ambassador of a free galaxy, knowing that humanity had not just earned its place among the stars, but had helped create a better future for everyone. The war was over. The real work of building lasting peace was just beginning. And somewhere in space, human ships continued their patrol routes, watching the darkness between the stars and ready to defend the freedom they had helped create. Because that, Daniel knew, was the human way, to be prepared for the worst while working toward the best. The galaxy was free, and humanity would make sure it stayed that way.